Welcome to all join us now. For our final session of the day, I'm pleased to introduce from Hexaware, Tim Ledger, VP of Customer Experience Transformation, and Roger Arias, the AVP for Contact Center Transformation, Practice and Solutions. Today, they join us to discuss a new method to deliver an omni-channel customer experience with cloud contact centers and content operations to meet the ever-changing needs and expectations of a customer. Without further ado, over to Tim and Roger.
Great. Well, first, welcome to the Rethink, Redefine, Reinvent customer experience with the power of three. So first, just a quick introduction of Hexaware. We're a $1.2 billion company that's part of the Carlyle Group. And what we do is we create smiles through great people and technology. And how do we do it? Just focused on three things: automate everything, cloudify everything, and customer experience transformation. So let me introduce this session and really what we want to cover with you. First, we all know that the consumer, the way they interact with the brands, it really has dramatically changed. The proliferation of digital channels, it used to be 4, now it's 10. And this is coming from, all of the different technology advances. So your consumers are coming more empowered with information than ever before. And what they expect from companies has also changed. They really want this hyper-personalized experience that's relevant, engaging, and convenient. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And that's really what creates the challenges for the brands. And that's really why the Rethink, Redefine, and Reinvent is really required. And what's the power of three? We'll get into that, quite a bit in the next half hour or so. But really, it's our vision in terms of how companies can deliver this really omni-channel customer experience with cloud contact centers. We're going to talk a little bit about it. It's also pulling in content operations, which was really one of the things that was missing before. And it really meets the expectations of the clients. So during the webinar, we'll be talking about the power of three. The power of three is content-driven, it's cloud-driven, and it's Maven-driven. And Maven-driven is the super agent. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So what we'll do is really, hopefully, you'll walk away with some insights and a little bit of some tools in how you can actually rethink, redefine, and reinvent your customer experience and utilize this power of three. So with further ado, let me jump into it. So first, why rethink, redefine, and reinvent customer experience? I think, to put it simply, for your company to survive. I won't stop there since this is a 30-minute webinar, actually 45 minutes. So let me go on and add a little bit of detail. As I said, we live in an era where there is a incredible connection with the Internet of Everything, and the consumer really is no exceptions. And these consumers really want you to understand their needs and wants, and they're changing. And competition, especially if they're digitally born, are really have the advantage. So if you look at it, think about it, different demographics really have unique expectations. Millennials, Gen Zs, every demographic. The loyalty of Gen Zs and millennials have changed, and people will change brands really easily. So for instance, when I was going to the airport the other day, my Lyft was late, so now I'm just going to use Uber. So it's really easy to change, and people change all the time. Customers really expect the brands to know them from their past interactions. When like, for instance, when I call United Airlines, you can tell I travel a lot. It's, welcome back, Timothy. Are you traveling today? Or you've called before. So having that history is really important. The other thing is customers want real people and real stories. If you look at it, whenever you use anything, what is the first thing you do? You go online. And actually, you don't look for what the company is saying. You look for the reviews. So when I go to a restaurant, it has to have above a 4.5. And, so I don't go to the restaurant. So those reviews are really, really important. How do you generate those reviews is becoming increasingly important. And hyper-personalization is really paramount. So, you used to do these personas. Now it's a persona of one, not of a group. And they really want you, a customer wants you to understand, hey, I need this, but also really what is unsaid. The next is service differentiation overpowers product differentiation. People now are not looking just to buy a product. It's really looking to almost buy an experience. So that becomes increasingly important. Trust and empathy is actually paramount. If you look at it, the bulk of customers will stay with a brand where they feel respected and connected. And going back to how quickly and easily people can switch brands, that's becoming increasingly important. So Deloitte had an interesting study, and they said that over 90% of leaders agree that customer experience management is an integral business strategy for creating long-lasting relationships. But given that, when you look at it, the majority of enterprise are falling short on delivering that experience that their customers are expecting. And I think if you just reflect on your companies, would you say you're as far along in that as you need to be? And I think the honest answer would be somewhat, but not quite there. And that's really the bulk of, I work with a lot of different customers, and that is the bulk of what the customers I work with would say. So let's look at, what's the first step in actually, getting to this power of three. The first thing is every stakeholder in the ecosystem needs to be engaged. It really becomes, you need to have an integrated approach, and you need to have alignment across the organization. All the technologies need to interact, all the operating teams need to be engaged, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So if you look at it from the people that are engaging with your customers, what they need is, it needs hyper personalization. It needs to be contextual and targeted. It has to be, as I said before, it has to be demographic specific, industry specific, and need specific. So it needs to be really geared to a specific person. That omni-channel experience for customer experience is becoming increasingly important. You need to have a unified experience. So regardless of which channel, I know before it was 4, now we're talking about 10, it needs to be seamless. And what's also changing is that it needs to be pull-based versus push-based. So when people are interacting, they want to decide, do I want to go to chat? Do I want to go to voice? What really infuriates me if something is chat only. I like voice. And even, I have an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old. They will at some point want voice as well. So having that option to pull whatever you want is increasingly important. Zero queue experiences. We need smart automated virtual agents 24/7. If I get a message, wait 24 minutes, I'm not waiting 24 minutes. That zero queue experience is increasingly important. I have zero patience. The next is looking at, what does it mean for an organization? The key really is a cloud contact center. And, a few years back, everybody was, well, should we put everything in the cloud? Well, now the cloud is more secure than on-prem. And what that gives you really is ability to scale on demand, which is increasingly important. You need to be able to instantly deploy resources. It has, really limitless scale. If you look at Amazon, during their busy season, they spike tremendously. They're a client of ours. You wouldn't be able to do that without the cloud. And you really need these cognitive interactions. And, when we talk about, wanting these customer experience representatives, we call them new Mavens. Talk to you a little bit more about what that means. They really need to be supported by AI and ML that really gives them that next best action. So there's a ton of information out there. A lot of it, you may argue, isn't really useful, but what's really important that those agents get that information that is useful. The next is really having enhanced customer experiences. You need to really understand the customer's journey really across all the various touch points, and you want to really make sure that they're getting the right information at each of those touch points, and they're getting consistent information at each of those touch points. So those customer experiences really need to be flawless. And then for the customer success champions, the people who are, driving that organization, it's really now you have the anywhere agent, right? You've got people, you're on the cloud, but you have remote working. It's going to be hybrid for most companies. Some are actually going to remain, just work from home. So you need to be able to handle those flexible environments. And, it needs to be, persona driven. I was talking about, happy agents drive higher productivity. So it's important through all of this, you're not only focused on the customer, which is the priority, but you can't lose sight of giving these agents what they need to do their jobs. Adding gamification, really focusing on making sure that they are enjoying the job, because as we look at it and talk about it more, their roles are changing and they're increasingly becoming much more important in terms of being your brand representative. And all of this needs to be augmented with intelligence. So really power and man and machine really all come together. And this really allows the agent to really look at that 360-degree view of the client, using the AI, getting that next best action to really drive those connections with the client. So all this comes together and supports the new CX representative. What we call it here at Hexaware is the new Maven. Think of that as the smart advisor, as the super agent. These agents now, much more than just being, the contact center agent, they need to really build that trust and connection. They need to not only know the product, they need to know the services. They need to actually even know the domain. They're expected to kind of be, a trusted advisor. If you look at it, they need to look at driving that innovation, and they need to be much more empathetic. So, we talk about the need for them to be, you have the IQ, the EQ, and now we need to be the SQ, the social intelligence. They need to really be much more empathetic to be able to build that connection, to be able to build that trust. And actually, you really need to transform the contact center. And what we call it is a customer experience center. You can call it whatever you will, but that transformation has to be much more than just being a contact center. And what all this needs to do is it needs to really simplify the interactions that they have, using that pull, be able to go to and reach out to you in whatever channel they want. It needs to deliver a much more superior experience. It needs to be much more of a soulful connection. So, if you look at millennials and Gen Zs, when they reach out, they really are looking for more of a trusted advisor, someone that they can really, relate with and really talk to. So the agents, of today are much different, and that way you hire needs to actually reflect that. So you're changing the whole ecosystem to support the agents, but then you're also changing those agents because they are much more the representative of the brand. So if we look at, what Hexaware's approach is, and, the clients that I've worked is, how do you actually pull this all together? And that's where this power of three concept comes in. And it's really where you have that, the convergence of the customer experience. And what we looked at, there's really three components. So the power of three is, first, it's content driven. It needs to be cloud driven. And then it needs to be Maven driven, so supported by these super agents. When we looked at different customers and looked at different companies, the way a lot of companies approach this is more in a siloed manner. For instance, when you're doing a CX transformation, it's really all about the cloud, putting that contact center in the cloud, focus on the technology, looking at the AI, but not looking at the content, looking at the marketing supporting that, and not really looking at the change in creating the Mavens. Some companies do look at the cloud-driven and Maven-driven. What I found is very few look at the content-driven, so the marketing up front. And when you think about it, you really want to reach out and touch the customers even before they buy, because you want to influence that. So with social media, with what I talked about, you're going out, you're doing your own research, you need to be reaching the customers before they even decide to buy, very early in the decision-making process. If you look at Amazon, you buy a book, you get 7 recommendations. So there, Amazon, I think, is very good at driving, that content up front. So within content driven, the first you have, the user generated content. If I look at it, I think this is really one area where most companies don't put as much focus as they should. I think this is really the game changer that can really drive revenue. So if you think about it, if there is a review that's negative, if you look at the reviews on Yelp and a restaurant has one or two negative, you're not going to go. Simple as that, right? Why take the chance? So it's really important that user-generated content is positive, and you really want to create some brand ambassadors. So how you manage user-generated content is really important. Same thing on social media. If there's a negative review, you need to manage that. And then product information is increasingly important. It needs to be consistent across these channels. It needs to be accurate. It needs to be complete. It needs to be compelling. So what we've looked at it is it's really important when you look at this customer experience, you need to get that front end. So marketing really needs to be involved much more earlier. It needs to be much more integrated. And that, I think, was one of the missing links when we looked at it. And that's the thing when we chat with our clients and when I work on a customer experience transformation, that's really the one area where I focus on. Cloud driven, I think, getting that omni-channel experience, getting a contact center out in the cloud, being able to drive that hyper-personalized self-service, using conversational AI. Companies are there. Companies that were born digital got there a lot faster. A lot of companies are on that journey. If I look at one of my clients, it's a 2-year journey. That's too long. There's lots of reasons for it, but the key is, the faster you get there, the better, and the longer you get, the more chance you have of not surviving. So really, this is all about using the latest technology. It's evolving constantly. And then in the end, as I talked about before, it's all about letting those clients interact the way they want to interact. Then we go over to the Mavens. Like, this is really interesting. Now, these really become, as I talked about, the smart advisors, the domain experts, much more empathy based. Talked about, they have to have the EQ, in the SQ. And it really is a different animal than the agent of the past. And when you combine these three, I think this is really where you get that optimum, experience. When you talk about what's the omni-channel experience, this drives that. And it definitely, if you do this right, this is what powers that hyper-personalization. So that super agent, that Maven-driven agent or redefined, has the information that it needs. It can actually have the interaction that client works. It knows the product, it knows the service, it knows the domain, and that really drives the interactions that they're looking for. So what I want to do now is turn it over to my colleague Roger, and I want him to walk you through a use case, and it'll kind of illustrate the different interactions and channels that a client can use. And kind of as you go through, you'll see, the content, the cloud, and Maven driven coming through. So I think this will be helpful to kind of put it in context. So Roger, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Tim. And that last sentence on that slide, orchestrating immersive interactions across every single touch point, is a great segue to this to dive into this use case. So we'll try to illustrate and visualize the power of 3 in the context of an example, a use case. And in this case, John is planning to buy a new battery for his car, right? So he's doing some shopping online, and this is something that is real to one of our clients. It's a realistic scenario to one of our clients, so we decided to adopt this scenario for this example. So John is shopping online, and we'll start at the top left and continue through the dotted line. So stick with me as we walk through this. As he shops online, he goes to the auto parts company website. He navigates the website. He looks through car batteries, and he finds one that he could be interested in, adds it to the cart. But he doesn't decide to purchase at the moment. He decides to move on to something else. But a few days later, John receives a reminder, an email reminder, which is automated. letting him know that he did not purchase his battery. Battery's still in the cart. And in the meantime, John has come across, through social media platforms, some advertising links and messages, including some of the battery features and videos, user videos that are very specific to the battery he added to the cart. So it's very personalized. From that email, he clicks on it, he goes to the website, he lands on the product page, and he has an opportunity to once again review the ratings. He goes to the Q&A, he goes to the questions and answers. He still finds that there are some unanswered questions about the product he's evaluating, so he decides to start a chat. And this is a conversational bot that the auto parts store, the online store, has available to customers. He's able to ask his questions online on the chat window, and he's able to get the answers immediately. So the product questions he had are now resolved, and he decides to move forward with the purchase. So he goes ahead, he adds, he proceeds, he goes to his cart once again and proceeds to check out. Since John has created a profile and it's known to the auto parts store that John is a brand new customer, first time buyer, he earned a first time buyer offer, right, a promo code, and he tries to use that promo code in the checkout step, but he realizes there's an error, and he's unable to move forward. So there's several options on the website to deal with this, right? So for John sees an option to chat, which he's already used and interacted with a chatbot. He sees, an option to email, but he also sees an option to call. He decides to call. He feels that that's the best option for him at the time. So the auto parts store is actually providing John with several options, and John gets to choose which option to communicate with the customer service department to get his issue resolved. So the call is routed to a live agent. The live agent is able to see the customer's journey, John's journey, throughout this purchasing process on the website. So he has, the agent has immediate context to Tim's point about, the value of a Maven. So saving John some time and effort to kind of explain the situation, having that content help the agent address John's questions and issues very, very easily, generated a new promo code, and John was on his way to complete the checkout and the purchase successfully. So once John does complete the purchase successfully, he receives a confirmation message. He receives an email confirming his order with his order details and some user-generated content from other customers that are relevant to the product he purchased. So it's helpful information for John while he waits for his product to be delivered. However, the delivery is delayed. There is some issue, for instance, with the shipping carrier, and John receives an SMS notification informing him of the delay. But John doesn't see this immediately. He later checks his phone and notices he has an SMS notifying him of the delay. He decides to get more information about what's happening, and he just responds to the SMS. And this is a channel that is supported by the contact center. So the SMS message reaches one of our Mavens, one of our agents, and in their unified omni-channel contact center screen, offers John, again, the agent has context about the history with this particular customer, offers John the reasons for the delay, offers John a discount voucher for the inconvenience to use in his next purchase. And a couple of days later, once the product is delivered, John just receives his battery and receives a delivery confirmation via email. He gets the options to provide feedback to the brand. He gets the option to, in an email, to review the additional DIY videos about how to install his battery. and so forth. But in addition to that, he also gets communications around how to benefit through a loyalty program by providing his own user-generated content, such as recording his installation experience, right? So this is an example that aims to illustrate how the power of three components that Tim described, the content, the cloud contact center, and the Maven, which is our agent in this example, come together to help the customer complete the purchase, right, with the least effort possible, and resolve any issues encountered along the way, but with a personalized touch. Back to you, Tim.
So I think, thanks for that, Roger. I think this is, the intent of this, I think, is a great example of just walking through all the interactions and then tying it back to that user-generated content. And as I mentioned, that's one of the things that was missing. I think this is a great way to actually get John to respond, because no matter what you buy, no matter where you stay, no matter when you fly, right, you always get a survey. This is much more than just a survey. As Roger said, it's getting a video of the installation, getting a recording of the satisfaction. So thanks, Roger. I think that's a great example. What I want to do now is take it. So that was an example of a customer walking through. What I want to share is an example of a company that I work with and have taken on this journey. It's a technology-enabled consumer services company that works in the credit repair industry. So first, let's look at content-driven. What they found and we found is really that going back to those stories, and it was canned actors. It really wasn't real people. So what we really worked on is creating and capturing really impactful user-generated content, and building really a community that was they were relevant, they were engaged, and really becoming customer brand ambassadors. As you are aware, credit repair is, people are very emotional about it. So when you do it and really help them, you really can create brand ambassadors. So really working on that really transformed their user-generated content, making it much, much more impactful. And they did see an increase in sales, and also actually in retention, which is equally important. And if you looked at it as well, they really had a very low return on their marketing, and especially around their social media investments. So what we really look to do with them is really create much more of an outcome-driven approach and really look at, what is the digital marketing they're doing, what channels are they going after, and really looking at from an ROI standpoint, where are they having the biggest bang for their buck, and are they managing it appropriately? So that was really the change they made, and really looking at linking it to, as I said before, getting that client engaged up front, much more getting the brand recognized. So when people are looking, because there are lots of credit repair companies out there really setting themselves apart with the stories, with the personal stories. So it's, that was really what they found, and how they started first changed their approach around UGC, around product information management, around social media management. The next is the cloud. They had very, very limited omni-channel capabilities. They were still on-prem. So what they did is let's not wait for introducing a contact center in the cloud that really is omni-channel enabled. That is the goal, but not there yet. So how do you actually get there sooner? So introducing chatbots. So actually wrapping something around the on-prem to start and advance them down that journey. They really, as well, lacked those personalized self-service options. And this really is an industry where it does need to be very, very personalized. And it's no more, it's this, this is the persona. It really, everyone really is different, and really work with them to journey map the various clients at a high enough level that you could go down and look at whether it's Gen Z, whether it's millennials. You have to look at different income levels. And what we worked to do is create some targeted offerings. We actually created some online offerings. Before there was nothing online, everything had to be done through voice. So really kind of changed their whole approach to marketing, leveraging the cloud. The next was really, how do you create these Mavens? For them, it really started at the beginning is, how do you train them? They had in classroom PowerPoint education that lasted for 3 weeks. So you can imagine how mind-numbing that was. So what we really did first is really just change that completely around, make it on-demand, multimedia training modules, gamified it. So really completely reinvented their whole approach to training, which is really key. So you want as we go back to what we talked about earlier, you want your new Mavens to actually have a positive experience. And, this is actually getting that positive experience right up front. The next issue they had a really outdated knowledge management database. It was inconsistent. It was providing different information. So of course, you had to go to multiple places and you had different information coming at you. So it was impossible to really know what the next best action was. The other issue here, this is a credit repair company, and compliance is hugely, hugely important. So if you make an error, if you give some misinformation, actually can have significant legal ramifications. So this one was really important to fix, not only to empower the Mavens, but also to keep yourself out of trouble. So we implemented a new L&D complete transformation program mentioned above, but also linked it to really replacing that knowledge management to make sure that they're empowered with that next best action, so they can have the right level of empathetic conversations. So that's just some things they ran into as they tried to tie this all together. And so what are some key takeaways that they would share? And I chatted with them about it just to get their view. The first thing really was, they were going down the path of this cloud transformation, introducing the cloud. But they weren't treating it holistically. They were treating it as just an IT project. And that's not going to drive that hyper-personalized experience. So really, that's the key takeaway. Don't treat it as an IT project. The next really, hit on it was, empower the Mavens with the right training, with the right technology that actually gives them that next best action. I think if you reflect on your companies right now and say, are your Mavens, first of all, do you have Mavens? And everybody talks about that next best action, but is it really easy for that Maven to actually get at that and then really understand it and then have the information to go one step even further? The biggest benefit they got was creating brand advisors, using that user-generated content to actually engage their customers and then have those customers give those, live feedback, relevant feedback, and become brand ambassadors. The other thing they did really is it's very expensive to acquire clients in this industry. And there tends to be a lot of churn because once your credit's fixed, you kind of leave. So how do you actually retain those customers? And by using the UGC, by using social media, by creating these targeted offerings, they were able to actually, increase revenue. So this is an example of a client that, how did they go about, the power of three, which is, the content-driven, cloud-driven, and Maven-driven, and some key learnings, some key takeaways for you. So let's end with, some points to ponder around the power of three. So for being content-driven, I think there's a few questions that you can ask yourself. The first one, and the most obvious, are you leveraging the power of user-generated content to its fullest? are your existing customers your brand ambassadors? Are they actually willing to not only give a positive review, but really promote the brand? Do you have consistent and complete service information on the website for visitors to make an informed purchase? And if your product information is on multiple websites, that becomes even more important. Do you look at content services as an additional revenue channel? This is really an important one because I think for most companies, this really is an untapped opportunity, at least with the majority of companies that I've interacted with. This is one that is very often missed. I've been doing a lot of talking, so I'm sure that you would appreciate another voice. So let me turn it over to Roger to bring you through the cloud-driven and Maven-driven. Roger, over to you.
Yes, absolutely, Tim. Yes, just to talk about, a little bit about the cloud component. The key questions are around scalability and flexibility. Can you scale to support seasonal volume changes or to support your agents really working from anywhere? Do you need a faster way to implement new capabilities? Your business continues to evolve and change. So how quickly are you able to deploy changes and continue to improve your contact center to provide a better customer experience? Maybe you've already migrated to the cloud, but are you really taking a full advantage of cloud contact center capabilities and how it gives you the flexibility and the ability to integrate easily with the systems around you and be able to provide the agents with a 360-degree view of the customer? Are you providing a true omni-channel experience to your customers? As we saw in the example before, it doesn't really matter, what channel the customer uses. You meet the customer where they are and provide the customer with a seamless experience. On the Maven side, we need to empower the agents to become Mavens. So do they have a simple and easy-to-use unified omni-channel user interface? Are they able to see or view holistic customer information about their account, about their history, about their journey for purchasing a product, about previous interactions, so that the agent is empowered to provide hyper-personalized experience? And are you leveraging AI agent assist technology? Are you giving the agent tools powered by AI to make more informed decisions throughout the interaction, to provide better information to the customer just in time, and to increase agent productivity to solve problems faster? So those are, kind of the takeaways, to internalize the power of these three components.
Great, thanks for that, Roger. I think in the end, too, you need to be clear up front in terms of what you want to achieve, when you want to achieve it, and then make sure you're measuring success. As I said, it's important to have, ROI, especially around, the social media, investments that are being made. So with that, let me first appreciate and thank you for taking the time. And hopefully we gave you some insights, a few tools to approach, and actually how do you actually, really create that impactful, personalized, very customized client experience. So let me turn it over and see if there are any questions. We've got about 10 minutes left. So actually not quite 10 minutes. We talked a little bit longer as I usually do. So let's see if there's any questions.
Thank you to Tim and Roger for those insightful comments on customer experience and Power of Three. We do have some questions from the audience, so we'll get on with that since we're getting a bit short on time. The first question is, how will Power of Three improve customer experience? Will not individual tracks do the same?
I think the answer is no. Individual tracks won't do the same. And I think you really need to actually have touch the customer before they actually even think they want to buy. So that, that upfront piece becomes really important, that content-driven piece. Then if you look in again on that cloud-driven piece, it's really important that, that technology, that omni-channel capability is there to actually support that hyper personalized experience, the chatbots, all those things, giving that agent the next best action. And then all of that helps turn that old, agent into a Maven. And again, you also need to kind of rethink, the type of agent you have. The current agents probably aren't the Mavens. So you really need all three. And I think if you really want to create that personalized experience and really drive revenue, drive the brand ambassadors, that interaction needs to be seamless across. So what we found is it really does require all three. And you don't want to do them in silos, because if you do them in silos, kind of one at a time, you'll kind of miss some things, and it'll also take a lot longer.
That's great, very insightful. So the next question, how early can you see impact of the Power of Three from implementation?
Roger, you want to take this one? Only because I've been talking the majority of the time. So in fairness, I'll let you have equal airtime. Plus, it's a hard question.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. So it's always a good idea to have a structured approach and a progressive approach to implementing the Power of Three in the organization. It's the multi-pronged, exercise, if you will. And as you progress throughout your implementation, you can gain small wins and see value and impact on business outcomes and customer experience immediately. So the idea is not to, as Tim mentioned earlier, the idea is not to put together a roadmap and plan a project that's going to last 2 to 5 years. That's the big picture, but you do want to implement it progressively in an agile manner and gain some wins along the way so you can start generating value for your business as soon as possible.
Okay, that's great. So our next question is, how do you bring together different sections of the enterprise to enable Power of Three?
I think if you look at it, it's really about treating it as a holistic transformation project. And I really think it's critical to understand the strategy, have a strategy. It needs to have buy-in, of course, leadership buy-in. And usually, to be honest, the senior executive leadership buy-in is usually there. It's really when you get down to that layer below, because you got to break the silos. And sometimes in a lot of organizations, especially, we're talking about the ones that aren't digitally born, that becomes a little bit more of an issue. So what I found to be effective is really, create it's a transformation project, right? It's a change management project. You need to go into that, and you need to have all the stakeholders engaged. If you go back to one of the earlier slides I showed, that's why it's laid out that way. You've got to get all the different people, and you've got to understand what each element is doing. So I think it's really driving it as a holistic end-to-end transformation project with the right project management, all the stuff that goes around a very comprehensive transformation program. And don't forget the change management, because that's really the key.
Okay, that's great. So our final question, how can you bring empathy to conversational AI?
There's a couple things.
Yeah, I could say. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Roger. It's right at your airtime. I forgot.
No, it's all right. No worries. On that one, in order to inject empathy into a customer interaction, whether it's a digital conversational bot or it's a live person, there has to be a 360-degree view of the customer's profile. So there are layers of integration and customer data required in the background in order to facilitate that. But it's very possible to inject empathy into conversational AI interaction, just the same way or in a similar way you do with a live agent interaction, by training the conversational AI to take into consideration important aspects of the customer's journey, of the customer's demographics, of the customer's account information, for instance, et cetera, right? So that's pretty much, how you do it. It's a very similar approach to what you would do with a live agent, but the way you design, that conversational experience with AI, it's important to bring in those elements of 360-degree customer view.
Thank you for that. Very insightful. And thank you to Tim and Roger for their presentation. I'm sure everybody got a lot of value out of that. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us on our second day of CX Network Live Contact Centers 2022. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow where we'll have a slightly later start time of 10 a.m. EDT. We'll be hearing different discussions on voice technology in contact centers, conversational analysis and agent improvement, and how to up-level agent engagement and performance. A quick reminder to all, anybody that's not tuned into all the sessions today, which the sessions will be available on demand following this session. And thank you again, and we can't wait to tune in tomorrow for the final day. Thank you.